Rough. Yes, I saw him in action this past Friday at the Ukrainian Cultural Center. Basically, ref the main event of Minoru Suzuki versus Jonathan Gresham. He's worked championship wrestling from Hollywood, GCW, Ground Zero, trained by the legendary B-Boy. He's the one, the only, Chad Rico. Chad, what's going on?
Thanks for having me, brother. How you doing?
Good, man. And it's. Do you want to tell the story about
No,
how
I
this?
think it's better if you tell it. It's
Okay,
better from your point of view.
so I think I saw Isaac Hayes, right, and a bunch of other folk. Because where the Ukrainian complex parking lot is, shout out to the Ukrainian complex parking lot and the Ukrainian community, because we didn't have to pay for parking. It was a big, luxurious parking lot right next to it. The Ukrainian complex cultural community center. I'm fluffing up the name, but it's big and cavernous, and there's this big, like aquamarine cyan kind of like half dome thing that is absolutely just beautiful and breathtaking. But on my way in, I see the good brother Isaac Hayes, and I was like, "Hey, whatever." And I said it in such a way that everybody fucking looked back. But one of the people who looked back is you, and I was like, "Hey, Isaac's been on the podcast. You should be on the podcast." And you're like, "What the WTF?" And
Yeah.
you're like, so humble. I'm just a referee, and I was like, Isaac's just a referee. And you guys have the
Yeah.
whole insight. I'm gonna follow you on, or we'll hang out after. But I kind of had to do something, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't hang out, and then I looked at the book face, and I was like, hey, we're friends already. And then
Yeah,
I
dude.
and then I went and hunted out your Twitter and your Instagram, followed you. I put them in the link below for anybody that wants to procure your services, which they should. Um, but yeah, and that's kind of how we got here. Some rando crazy person going, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" Which is like a local in-person view of when I shoot people DMs. So
hmm
that's what it is.
No, I was glad you reached out because I think this is like the first official podcast I've ever actually done like a one-on-one like sit down interview. I've been on a podcast before, but it was like there was like five of us like on it. But this is the first time I'm ever doing like a one-on-one, and it's just us sitting here having a conversation. So when you reached out, I was like, "Sweet man, let's do it." And the way you reached out too, I was like, "This guy seems like really chill." He's like, "Man, you want to be on my podcast?" And like I said, I was like, "I'm just the referee," and you're like, "Isaac's been on it," and I was like, "Let's do it, man." So
Yeah,
here we
no,
are, man.
here we are. And former professional fighter and Twitch streamer. Funny that you mentioned, doing stuff on Twitch. But Chris Cross, who will be on the According to Woods podcast this coming Friday, he's like, "Let's go, let's go, let's go." So
Sweet.
yeah, man. I don't think we can start off any better than an origin story, because you're Chad. Even though I might have a couple years over yet, you're one of my heroes. You are working the biz, right? But every hero has to have an origin story. At least I don't know anything about comic books, so total disclosure. But this is what I've heard, right? So
hmm
with that all being said, like, how did you, find pro wrestling in the first place?
So mine's pretty much I was born in San Diego, born and raised. I still live here to this day, and pretty much just grew up watching pro wrestling and MMA. Like that was the cool thing for me was I was able at a very young age was able to respect both the arts. Like one night I'd be watching The Undertaker in a casket match. Next thing you know, we're ordering a UFC pay per view to see BJ Penn fight. So I grew up on being a huge fan of both. So it had stuck with me forever. And then one thing a lot of people don't actually know because I'm not super like open about it, not because I'm like shy and don't want to like talking about it, but it's just something that doesn't really come up in conversation, not on purpose. But I was born with a heart defect, which required me to have a pacemaker, which I still have to this day.
Wow.
So growing up loving wrestling, I was around 9 years old, and I had had a routine operation where every 6, 7 years they just go in into my chest and they just make a small little incision and just replace the pacemaker with like a brand new one, basically like a battery. So I remember I was at home, I'm laid up, beat up on the couch, and I'm recovering. And one thing my grandma used to always do, she would clean the house like crazy when we had people coming over. Like insanely. Like, like you ever get like a nice detail? She would like detail the whole house. That's how I knew every time, like, oh, like my cousins are coming over, oh, uncle's coming over, because she would start cleaning like crazy. On this particular morning, she's doing her thing, and I'm like, oh, like who's coming over? She keeps telling me, don't worry about it. Someone's coming over. And I'm like, okay, like whatever. She usually just tells me who's coming over, but here she is. She's cleaning, and finally she's all done with that. And up coming through the door walks Chuck Palumbo out of nowhere. And I'm like, I'm so starstruck because I watch wrestling every week. Full fanatic, a kid. I had never even been to my first WWE live show. My first WWE live show wasn't until 2007. It was a Monday Night Raw house show. So I hadn't even, I'm nowhere near, seeing wrestlers in real life at all. And in comes Chuck Palumbo just to visit me, man. Somehow, one of my grandma's friends, I still am not sure about the connection, but they knew him because Chuck kind of works like around like San Diego area. I
Yeah.
think he still lives here.
No, he does. He's got the motorcycle shop.
Yeah. He pulled up with the motorcycle and everything. It's on Instagram. I have the pictures there, so if anyone wants to go check it out later, I have it on there. And I just remember like he came and he spent like 2 hours with us. Like I had just recovered from a surgery. He showed me his bike. He gave me a bunch of cool like figures. He gave me stuff that was signed like to me, and like that was just insane. And like it was from that day forward where I realized like, hey man, like I actually, because I've always connected with seeing the guys on TV, like growing up, big fan of Rey Mysterio, John Cena. You're used to seeing them on the screen doing their thing. And this was the first time I ever interacted with a performer on like a personal level. And I was just like, man, these guys are like really cool, and that's the life I want to live. So when it comes to me deciding this is what I want to do for a living, I pay it all back to Chuck Palumbo. Because I don't know if I would have gotten the dedication and desire to do this if it hadn't had been for that visit. I always say that visit it's made a spark in a young kid's heart, is what I always say. For me, was that day with Chuck Palumbo. So from there, I was just like, from elementary school, I always knew that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pursue wrestling or MMA because referee officiating is my thing. I was a huge fan of soccer. When I was in middle school, I had joined an AYSO league to be a referee. So I started refereeing soccer. And that was like my foot in the door for like, not for pro wrestling, but for referee officiating in general.
Everything counts, bro. Everything counts, I believe.
Yeah, it all started pretty much like I got my foot in the door reffing with soccer. And I fell even more in love with that, doing that too. So.
Oh my God, shout out to Chuck Palumbo.
I know, man. He's
oh
awesome.
my God, yeah, and that's somebody who I've been a fan of since his WCW days with the Natural Born Thriller, and Jim Trek and O'Hare and above average Mike Saunders, like that. Like when I heard that they were going to like the WWE, I was just like, yes. Are we going to get Jim Trek and O'Hare versus the Hardy Boys and the Battle of the Swantons? And I had no idea why they sent Mike Sanders to developmental, to Uncle Les Thatcher in Ohio, right? Heartland, right? He's there with like Nigel McGuinness and a couple others. Yeah, but I was just like, what in the hell? You don't know what you have here?
Yeah,
Rage, rage. But I actually had like the opposite deal where I was living in Bakersfield, where my wife is from, where my youngest son Owen, yes, named after Owen Hart.
that's awesome.
Yes, my wife let me do it. I love her to this day. um, but and Owen will be 14 on the 28th. So I'm gonna put my Venmo in the description because yeah, he wants a VR Oculus headset. So
Hmm.
yeah, so there's that. But I remember being in Bakersfield, and I think they were either doing tapings or might be a live show. But I was at an Arco, and there's Randy Orton, and I say, "Hey, Randy, blah blah blah." This is like probably '08, '09, something like that, right? The cameras went whatever, but I was like an
Oh
auto.
eight, oh nine. That's a crazy time to meet Orton because that was when he started to really like. That was when he started to ditch the old theme song and he was still doing the Legend Killer stuff. That was when he was like starting to get his big championship reign and really be like the face of everything, you know? Because
Yes,
that
but
oh, that's the time when he led up to those matches he had with Cena at Breaking Point, that I Quit match. All that stuff was like you met him at like the perfect time once he was just shooting through the air in WWE.
no, I didn't because he gave me the bird and said f off, and as the on screen persona, you're right. That's what you eloquently described. Well, behind the scenes and the dirt sheets are like he was living that Van Halen wrecking rooms, 5 grand hotel bills almost at every stop.
Hmm.
Every booking. So yeah, I caught him. I caught him in that mode, right? So and yeah, he could have been tired. You got to drive all the way out from LAX to Bakersfield, from St. Louis or wherever they were the night before. So I get it, But then the very next week, Shane Carwin was doing a signing at a Max Muscle in the same kind of business complex that I worked at a FedEx office in Bakersfield. And Carwin, this is literally a week after that Brock Lesnar fight, where
Hmm.
Lesnar looked like a gorilla. Shane Carwin is a mountain with a head, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yes, and basically the signing was like 12 to 2. Carwin shows up at 10, doesn't leave until 4. Make sure every autograph is signed. When when a kid greets him, he and shakes his hand and they'd be timid, and he would go down almost to his knees and go like, "You're hurting me." If a military veteran with a cap or a shirt or whatever, thank you for your service, and would bow to them, right? And then
Yeah.
my sister, this was I think a Saturday or Sunday. Well, that Friday before, my sister got in a pretty bad wreck and she broke her collarbone, right?
Hmm.
And I was like, hey, I wanted to, even though my sister might not know who it is and whatever, I was just like, could you sign this for my sister? She was in a bad wreck or whatever. He's like, what's her name? And I'm like, Mara, right? And then he goes, okay. He signs her name. He basically signs one for me, a picture for me, and grabs probably about $200 worth of supplements. He's like, give this to your sister. So
Nice, man.
that's where I went, the MMA versus pro wrestling. So always loved pro wrestling, but I kind of went the route. I did jujitsu
Yeah.
rather than go up to what's his name, Roland Alexander's APW in Hayward, right? Because I was right on the cusp of doing either we're going to pack it up and go to Hayward, or oh yeah, just stay in town and do jujitsu. And I went and did jujitsu a couple years later. So yeah, that's it. But again, those seminal moments, they're outliers of like, what your path could potentially be.
Exactly. Yeah, man. That's what it's all about, you know? Just it's just all about the journey. Just let the journey. Life's a roller coaster. You're just on for the ride, you know? You don't know what's gonna happen next.
Yeah,
You
and
just
I mean,
go, man. Just keep going.
you just go, and there's something special. I mean, you're a San Diego native, but Chuck Palumbo, I believe, is a transplant. He's not originally from San Diego, but he's figured it out there. Bill Goldberg resides there. 619, Mr. Rey Mysterio, and
Yep.
Rey Mysterio is the complete opposite of like. There was a time in Bakersfield where it was autograph seeking at the Marriott or the yeah, I think it was the Marriott right next to the Rabobank Arena, and he was just signing autographs to anyone, whatever. And I wanted to take a picture, but he was sin máscara. He didn't have his mask on, right? And I
Mm.
was like, I felt weird. I was like, I don't want to whatever, but he signed a replica world title belt and a SummerSlam visor shade that I had, and he's like sit and talk to you like you're the only person in the world, and whether you're a worker or whether you're a fan or whatever. That guy, there's something about San Diego, which,
Mm-hmm.
with that being said, um, you went to your first live event, right? And then, you know, is it around the same time or a little bit after you start refereeing for soccer?
Mm-hmm. It was a long while. My first event I went to was a Monday Night Raw house show, and it was very late 2007, or no, I think it was the summer of 2007 because I'm pretty
Mm.
sure I was on summer break. But I'll never forget that day. I remember the main event was awesome. It was Triple H teaming up with Mysterio, and I remember Mysterio got a big pop because one, obviously that's San Diego's like hero right there, and he came out and he had San Diego Charger attire on, like he had the bolts on his mask, just Charger attire, and they faced Orton and Humaga.
Oh,
They yeah,
the
and they
late great.
had yeah, and they had a really good match. I remember there was one point where Umaga was on the apron and Triple H ran up and he did the knee and Umaga went and he sold out to the barricade. And when he hit the barricade, it was weird. Umaga didn't even go with the barricade. He like kind of jumped off the apron and like hit it with his shoulder, but the barricade went like flying. Thankfully, somehow those first rows was like maybe 10 feet back from the barricade, because if it was up close like how it normally is, all those people would have gotten hit. But I was like, that was just the pure size of Humaga. And like seeing that live as a kid for the first time, how enormous this guy is, was just crazy. Because that barricade spot, I remember being like, holy shit, like I'm way over here, but like that scared me, you know? It's like, get out of the way, people, watch out. And yeah, man, they had a killer, like solid 15-minute tag match. And Triple H and Mysterio won the baby faces. It was just a great night of wrestling in San Diego. It was like that. It was like, to me, like that was a wrestling show. You had the baby faces, you had the heels, you had the hometown guy. They
Yeah.
had a killer match. And it was simple. That's all it needed to be. And they did it. And they knocked it out of the park. So that was my first WWE live experience. And stuff like that was only lighting fuel to the fire for me to want to do this when I was older.
No, 100%. And that was what was so. Prior to Friday, I'd never been to a GCW show. Now rented the stuff on Fight. Friend of Barnett, the War Master. So like
Mm-hmm.
I order all the blood sports and like the For the Culture because Too Cold Scorpio. Which, funny enough, I didn't know he was going to appear. I popped so hard. It was like Road Warrior prop for me, just one man Road Warrior prop because
Mm-hmm.
I'd watched him since like WCW when he was tagging with Marcus Alexander Bagwell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before he
Yeah,
became Big
man.
Papa Puff. I mean, not Big Papa Puff, but Buff Bagwell, right? And yeah, I just love that guy, and yeah, when I saw him, I was just like, oh. But the GCW crowd, right? You had like that death match between I think it's Alex.
Alex Cologne and G
Yeah,
Raver. I
yeah.
had that one, yeah.
Which I mean, I saw. Oh, there he is. Hey guys, this is According to Woods, and this is Chad Rico, an impresario of pro wrestling referee. He might. Oh, here he is. He's back.
In there. That was weird.
No
All right, we're
worries. No
back.
worries. You're fine.
Hopefully it doesn't do it again. If it
Yeah,
does, I can get right back into it.
it
So.
happens. It happens. But no, yeah. So Alex Cologne and G Raver, which I was familiar with their work because the night after, I saw that Moxley had beat Matt Cardona, the former Zack Ryder,
Mm-hmm.
for the GCW World Title, and I was like, oh, I got to order it. So I plopped down the $15 or whatever, and I
Mm-hmm.
saw it. So I knew that, right? And when I saw like the the light tubes and whatever, get kind of strewn about the ring, I was like, oh, okay, this is where it's going. It's not my style. Like the the death match stuff. Like I like the FMW, right? But like Hayabusa and Onita and Mike Awesome, he was the Gladiator then. Um, who else? There's a lot of guys, right? Terry Funk and Mick Foley, but those guys
Legends,
were
yeah.
yeah, those guys were workers. And nothing against like G Raver and Alex Colon, because hell, the late great Lou Thez brought Abdullah the Butcher to Japan. It was like, and the promoter was like, "What does he do?" It's like he bleeds.
Mhm.
Lou Thez brought Abby. It was like he bleeds.
Yeah.
That's all he does. He bleeds. So um, it was my style. It was it was for me, I had my back to it, and that's not against the performers. It was just like for me, and especially kind of nausea after COVID. Um, yeah, I couldn't stomach it, but the crowd was into it. And then right after that, we had round funches with Tony Deppen, right? And I don't want to spoil it, but Paul Shear does something.
Yeah.
Danhausen, one of my favorite wrestlers right now, more teeth, very evil.
I agree. He's easily like in all of wrestling. Danhausen is one of the best characters that I absolutely love.
He's so different.
I think his stuff is great.
He's so different. And his vlogging,
Exactly.
the last one that I saw was him touring Chicago and the Pro Wrestling Tee store. And he goes back with Kylie Ray, who is teaching, the people, at the Pro Wrestling Tees wrestling school. And he's just so hilarious, so dynamic. And he's done stuff with like Renee Paquette, or Chris Van Vliet, two great podcasters, two of my heroes. Um, yeah, and he does like a out of character interview, and he goes for an hour, and he's still humble. He's super humble, but he's also dynamic. Like
Yeah.
there's to me, like he's my world champion. Like for real. Like I love all of the world champions or whatever, but like he's almost got like a different than Shinsuke Nakamura, but like that's a guy that if walking down the street, wrestling fan or no wrestling fan, you're gonna be like, who's that? Like, and to me, that draws money, right? And then
Yeah.
after that whole match and what have you, and I encourage you to get it on Fight TV. Um, it's amazing. But then you had you and Minoru Suzuki
Yes,
and Jonathan
sir.
Gresham, and the pops were all the same. You had a death match. You had a comedy celebrity match. Then you had, arguably one of, I mean, Josh Barnett would be proud, right? Like Billy Robinson would be proud. Carl Gotch would be proud. Giant Baba and Anoki especially would be proud of the match that they put on. And both men would be proud of the match, And again, it's something that you got to see, highest in the room, GCW. And I was just like, oh man, I like to me, GCW is on par with the WWE and AEW.
Oh, they're easily the best independent wrestling promotion in the world right now. I stand by that, and a lot of people would agree. They are easily the best. They sell out every show, everywhere they go, and they have a roster that is more over than you can imagine. And the crowds, there's not a match where they're like, oh well, we just had that banger of a match. This is kind of like the sleeper match. There is no sleeper match at a GCW show. The crowd is red hot for every thing that they do, whether it's a technical, strong style mat based wrestling match like Suzuki and Gresham had, whether it's the death match, whether it's the comedy match, whether it's because again, the show opened with a 5-man, I can't remember if it was a 5-man or 6-man lucha
Yeah.
scramble. Like, dude, they had lucha, comedy, death match, strong style. GCW is that only show that literally has everything. It has every style that you can think of, and it has the guys that are at the top of their game and the best in the business doing it.
No, 100%. And like I said, even though G Raver and Alex Colon wasn't my cup of tea, there's no doubt in my mind, judging by the crowd, right? And there's some great crowds, right? Like around the world. There's Tokyo Dome, right? There's Chicago, there's New York, New Jersey, right? There's
Hmm.
Florida, like so many great crowds all over the world, all over the country, or what have you. But I think they would have called BS if G Raver and Alex Cologne phoned it in, which they didn't. Kudos again. It's not my cup of tea, but kudos to both men for absolutely bringing it. All of the entire card, and also with GCW, they've revitalized Nick Gage's career. Right? Again, not my cup of tea, but if it's you, you got the biggest pop of the night. I think, the people that were Casa Ni Nare were like MGK, right? Or
Yeah,
MDK,
MDK.
right? Murder, Death, Kill, right?
Yeah.
So that to me, that's something, right? And Joey Janela. I don't think without GCW, he gets signed to AEW as quickly. I'm not saying he's not talented or whatever, but like they provided the platform via the spring break. Talk about spring break, right? We got to talk Walter and PCO, right?
Hmm.
And I think that match is what gets Walter, along with his entire body of work, signed to NXT UK, right? Or NXT, right?
And
And
shout out
PCO,
to Janela because when I made my debut for GCW, it was in Orange County in October of 2020, I believe. It was an outdoor show, socially distanced, masks
yeah.
required. It was GCW. Trying to remember what the name for that show is called. I can't exactly remember. It had got moved because it was supposed to be in Slab City, and then something happened over there, and they had to do a venue change, and it ended up in Orange County. And my debut GCW match was between Joey Janela and AJ Gray, and I just remember that match. They were the opener, and the crowd was red hot because so many fans had not been to a live show in so long, and they were just hot for the show. And they went out there and they tore it up. And I remember my debut for GCW. That was one of the best nights of my life. The guys I got to work with, I got to work with them. The match I had after that was a hardcore match with Sabu and Matthew Justice. It was just me and Rick Knox that night, so I was working alongside Knox. I had known Knox for a while through Ground Zero because he was basically the head official of there. So I'd gotten to learn from him when I was just a student of the game, like at pro wrestling school. Hadn't even debuted at all. So that GCW show is special for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And, I kind of noticed, right? You kind of stood out because you actually had not just a black shirt, but you had the GCW emblem on said black shirt. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, and to the untrained eye, you might have been the vet of it, that might have not seen Isaac Hayes' work or any of the other referees that night. Um, and perception is everything, right? But I mean, you, like I said, you, Isaac Hayes, Rick Knox, Allison Lay, you guys have, Odie Brown. There's so many that I'm probably forgetting, like that whole kind of Zebra Talk crew of the last, I'd say 20 years, have like the Ballard brothers. They had the one Ballard who didn't wrestle but worked as a referee a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like you guys are sight unseen but so vital to a pro wrestling presentation. If there's no referee, it kind of loses its luster.
Hmm.
I mark it every time I see like Da Brewer or Daryl Sharma on NXT because there was one night where I might have almost got into fisticuffs with the Usos, and they might have beat the crap out of me, 100%.
Holy crap.
Yeah, but then there was Brewer and Daryl Sharma, and I was like, Sharma was wearing a necklace with like a whale's tooth, and I was like, where's that from? He's like, Fiji. My parents are from Fiji, and I'm like, my mom is from Fiji, and I was like, well, I grew up in. He was like, I grew up in Canada, whatever, so I don't have that, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I grew up in the States, and I don't have that, whatever either. I'm not the squeaky clean Fijian boy, but
Yeah.
So I pop every time I fire up the NXT and see those two, and they were former workers, and now they're some of the preeminent referees in the business, and I just love seeing people do well because I know what the business can be, the ugly sides, the travel, the weird spots, the low payoffs, the promoters that might stiff you on a payoff, and it's rough. But like when you have these moments of like glory, right? Those are vital.
I absolutely agree, man.
So, how do you get into the acquaintance of one legendary b-boy?
So funny story. It was right after high school. I knew that I was going to pursue a career in wrestling, or a career. It wasn't necessarily wrestling, but I knew I wanted to be a sports official full time, or referee to simplify it up. Whether it was, I told myself it was like either going to be wrestling, soccer because I had been doing soccer officiating for a while, or the MMA stuff. And right out of high school, I was actually more geared toward going down the MMA route for officiating. So I went to Atos Jiu Jitsu, which is the school down here in
Yes.
San Diego, ran by,
Yeah.
as you probably know, Andre Galval, legend. And I trained with them for a little over a year. Got 2 stripes on my white belt. Whoop, whoop. And I remember I was like, I just wanted to go there because I wanted to learn before I went to Herb Dean's MMA referee school, which
In
was
Pasadena, right?
in Pasadena at the time.
That's Fight
And
Academy. That's where I
yeah.
trained the last time I trained.
hmm And I remember I even had talked to Herb Dean. I reached out to him and he gave me his number and he said, "All right, here, call me and I can run through you how everything's going to work." I called Herb Dean. We talked for about 30 minutes or so about the process, the school, what happens after, and everything. And I was pretty set on going to Herb Dean's MMA referee school to start to be an official for MMA. But during this time that I was doing jujitsu and I wanted to go the MMA route, I was still attending a lot of independent pro wrestling shows. And I was still also, whenever WWE would come to town, I'd buy a ticket and go as a fan. I had passion for both. And I remember I was going to a lot of independent wrestling shows, and I told myself, I said, if I'm spending a lot of time going to these shows all weekend, refereeing's my passion. I started to think, maybe what if I went down the wrestling route? The only problem was there wasn't any schools in my area at the time. There was SoCal Pro, which I was thinking about, but I told myself if I really wanted to get into this, I wanted to go to Santino Brothers,
Yeah.
which is down in Bell Gardens. I was
Yeah.
like, I'm willing to make the roughly close to 2 hour drive from San Diego to Bell Gardens to do the refereeing stuff. But I remember I had actually reached out to B-Boy because his school had not yet been fully it wasn't even running exactly yet. It was in the works, but it wasn't running yet. And I just reached out to him saying, oh, like I'm interested in training and being a referee. These are the 2 schools I was looking into, SoCal Pro and Santino's. Kind of like, what do you recommend? And he was just like, well, if you're interested, because he asked me if I'm in San Diego because he had seen me at a lot of shows. So yeah, San Diego, born and raised. He goes, well, we're in the process of starting a school here in San Diego in La Mesa called Level Up. La
Yeah.
Mesa's 10 minutes down the freeway from me. And I was like, huh, oh, okay. Maybe I'll maybe I'll hold off before doing Herb Dean or going or committing to Santino's or anything. I said, this sounds promising. And again, it was almost like a gamble because it's a brand new school. B-boy is legit. But again, it was like I was caught with the decision where okay, I could take a chance on this new school that at the moment isn't legitimate because it's not even running yet.
Right. Yeah.
But all these other places are made, like a Santino's, like a SoCal Pro. But I kind of wanted to bet on myself. I said, you know what? I was born and raised in San Diego, and I love pro wrestling. it would mean more to me to be trained out of San Diego as well. So I took a chance. I waited after I had initially talked to B Boy. Level Up opened up about 2 months later. So we're looking at November of 2018, I believe, is when I started training to be a referee. And then it was July of 2019, so about 7, 8 months of referee training that I had my debut. And from there, one thing led to another. And here I am on this podcast with you, and I've had plenty of amazing opportunities. I'm looking for more. I've gotten to work with the United Wrestling Network,
Mhm.
which, Primetime Live, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. I got to work New Japan. I got to work GCW. And it's just, I will say I have found working these places, I did not think I would be working with them in such short a period of time. But I'm also very grateful that I am. And sometimes it does even feel real. And it even goes back to just this past weekend, the Suzuki Gresham match, highlight for sure. But as I'm sitting here talking to you, I remember I came home that night and I put my stuff away and I laid on my bed and I went on my phone to watch scary stuff on YouTube. Like, oh, top 3 places not to visit. Like, almost like as if it didn't happen. And I remember sitting in my room and it's dark. It's really late. It's like 3 a.m. And I'm like, did that really just happen? Like, did I just officiate that match? And it's just kind of surreal. Sometimes the stuff I do, sometimes it doesn't even feel real. It's almost like an adrenaline, like you go skydiving and you're like, oh man, like I can't believe I did that. And I was so scared and it happened so fast. Anytime I get chances like these, they're very nerve wracking and sometimes even intimidating, but they all happen so fast. They all do. Like same thing happened with New Japan. When I debuted on New Japan Strong, I remember being very nervous, very anxious, and when it was all over, it didn't feel real. And I just remember being very grateful and just very blessed to be where I was at.
You putting in the work, my brother. That's to
Yeah,
me. That's hitting the ground running. Like again, you and Isaac has been on the scene for a number of years. But I mean, like this new crop of like you and like I've seen iterations. I've seen Knox at PWG. Running this stuff. I think I've only gone to one PWG when it was still at Reseda. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah, seeing them and making the towns and like even like back in like the 80s and 90s and whatever, Rick is always posting stuff from like NWA as a fan, at the forum, which I never thought happened. I grew up in Inglewood, and that's just like it blows my mind that NWA, not WWF, is doing that. But around that time, when I talked to my friends who were living here, they were like WWF went sports arena, NWA went forum, and I was like, oh, okay, right on, that makes sense,
yeah.
But
Hmm.
there's a couple different things, right? So you know, I'm glad that you went to. There's nothing against Santino brothers. I mean, you have Jack Farmer, your compatriot at you know
Hollywood.
the Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, United Wrestling Network, right? And
Yeah.
he just completed the Advocates course via Zoom. The previous Advocates course is Rain Cruz, who, you know, uh, basically does ring announcing for VWE or VE, like Value Wrestling Entertainment, as well
Hmm.
as OCCW. And, she just basically they made her WWE debut on the pre-show to SummerSlam, introducing Big E, which weeks later he's the WWE champion, right? So like, there's something special about Santino's. But then again, like I also have talked to, the first run, some of the people that were in the first graduating class from Santino, and there's like a level of like humility, but also a level of pride, right? So the fact that you're kind of like one of the only, I mean, were there any other referees in that first class?
Surprisingly, to this day, Level Up just had its third year anniversary show about 3 weeks ago or so. And surprisingly, to this day, there has not been, and even right now as we're speaking, there has not been someone who's walked through the doors wanted to be a referee. We haven't even had the whole, oh, I was training to be a wrestler, but I realized it wasn't for me, but I still wanted to be involved, so I took the referee course. Not even that. Everyone that's gone to level up has just strictly wanted to be a wrestler. We've had no one wanting to be announcers, none of that, which is very it's kind of shocking and it's very crazy. But all these 3 years, I'm still the only graduated referee to come out of that school, and it's kind of crazy. But
That's amazing.
we put in the work, man. The 3 years later, our anniversary show, and I was lucky enough to and honored to officiate the match between the Hollywood Heritage Champion Jordan Cruz, love him to death, against Level Up original student ENA, who, for those who don't know, is officially signed to NXT, and that was his first and last match on the independent scene before going out there. So it was like to be a level up day one, 3 years later, to have that caliber of a match, it means something. And it just goes to, remind us that all the hard work that we put in at level up, it pays off. Benny always tells us patience is key. You can't you can't get to step C without doing step A first. And he always tells us A to Z. And like he always says, patience is key. And here we are 3 years later. We've got guys winning championships, debuting places, getting signed. It's just all the hard work that we all put in together, which is why I always say, like, I'm very grateful I made the right decision to stay in San Diego and take a chance on a brand new school that really didn't have any legitimacy behind it. It was just, yeah, we're gonna start up a school, and here we are, all these years later. Best decision I ever made in my life.
I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you made it. And again, Joey Chaos Munoz and Mongol Santino and Sylvia, they're great, right? Have
Yeah.
always treated me great. B Boy, we're friends, kind of peripherally. Um, but I don't think we've ever met in person, which I was jazzed to see him as a manager advocate at GCW, because that was like, oh my gosh, like that's the first time I'd seen B Boy live and not in my magazine or YouTube clip. And I was just like, whoa, what? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I get the same way about the Lucha homies, it's like those guys, and I also wanted to, in terms of, I know you were going to, or at least in talks with doing MMA refereeing and what have you. But did you ever work shows like Epic or get involved with Camo as an inspector at all?
I did Epic one time. I can't remember to save my life exactly who all the fighters were and who was in the main event. I did do Epic one time though. I actually did Epic while I was still doing my referee training at Level Up,
Ah,
because I was still kind of like, well, I'm not completely ditching the MMA thing. I still wanted to be involved because I remember I was, they always say in wrestling, show face, show up, pay dues, do ring crew. And I was still training jujitsu at the time. And Epic was running in San Diego, and there was nothing wrestling wise happening at Ground Zero or Level Up or anything. And I had the free weekend, and I said, well, if I'm doing ring crew over here, I said, why don't I? And I'm still involved in the MMA community, being involved in jujitsu and everything. I was like, I'm gonna go to Epic, and it was literally the same thing. It was like it wasn't ring crew, it was cage crew. We built up the cage the night before, showed up. They gave me an Epic fighting shirt, and basically was just staff. And I remember that was like a lot of fun. But like shortly after that, the training just intensified at Level Up, and it just started becoming a thing where I was just prioritizing the wrestling more, which I should have, and I did. And it was just one of those things where, like, you know what, I'm all in with wrestling. I still love MMA a lot, but it was like wrestling. I'm like, I'm going all in, and I'm glad I've gone all in, and I have no thoughts of stopping anytime soon. My goal is to hopefully be signed one day, and it's just the ride, brother. Who knows what's going to happen? Maybe I'll get signed. Maybe I won't. There's a chance I'll never will. But you know what? That's the part of the journey. You never know. I've barely been in since debuting. I've been in the business a little over 2 years. And I remember when I first started, I told myself I didn't want to just be the local guy that only referees local shows. I wanted to get out there. I wanted to travel. I want to sleep in my car. I want to do all that stuff. And literally the very next weekend after I had debuted at Level Up at a student show, I was booked for Crimson Crown Wrestling in Los Angeles doing death matches. My second match ever in the business was a death match. But that was what I wanted. I told myself I'm full systems go. I don't want to pause. I don't want to wait till I feel I'm this. I just want to go all in and I want to get out there. And that's what's helped me with my career is just having that drive and doing whatever it takes to get out there. Because like I said, my second week of debuting, I was already in Los Angeles. And I was very proud of myself because even that, I thought, oh, it might take me a few months to get out of San Diego before other places start picking me up. But no, I was very surprised how fast tracked everything went. It was very surreal. I remember being there in LA doing ring crew, and I didn't know anybody. Even helping out with the ring, I'm like meeting new people because I'm so used to just doing it for Level Up and Ground Zero. It's all the students, like my friends, that I train with. It almost felt like being a new kid at a new school district on the first day of school. I
Yes.
was like, this is crazy, but I was like, this is what they've been training. This is what they've been training me at Level Up because it's not all about just your in-ring work stuff. It's etiquette. It's teaching you how to network, reach out to the promoters, send a professional resume. Hello, I'm so-and-so. I'm interested in working your show. If you need help with the ring crew, I can do that. That was all stuff that I was taught at Level Up as well, was basically how to get yourself booked and how to go about business.
I love it. I love it. And the man, I hope. I mean, it's common knowledge. Former UFC champion, former King of Pancrase champion, former Metamoris World Heavyweight champion, one Josh Barnett, the War Master, former IWGP World Heavyweight champion, Josh Barnett, uh, Bloodsport for the second time because it was at a sound stage last year, but for the first time in front of crowd, Bloodsport is coming to LA at the Ukrainian Cultural Complex in late October for the first time in front of fans. Right, so
Mm-hmm.
I hope that Chad Rico is on that card because you much like Isaac Hayes have this unique kind of tie to both uh, MMA and pro wrestling, and that's essentially what if you look at the landscape, right? If like jujitsu, catch wrestling, right, and then you get to like EBI with the open hand slaps, and then judo with like a little bit more throws and everything, right? And then I think EBI and like Bloodsport or Pancrase, the original Pancrase, is kind of that next evolution. Then you get to like obviously the Muay Thai boxing and what have you, and then the full on MMA or left way, right? So like you're uniquely suited. I mean, and you've got two more stripes on your white belt than I have. I'm a 6 year no stripe white belt. So
Belts don't mean anything, man.
yeah.
Belts don't really mean. It's just a color.
Oh, they say one of my friends and another podcast partner, Pius Inalalobo, former U of MMA champion that fought on some cards with like Dominic Reyes and what have you. He says, guess what? Black belt, punch him one time, becomes a brown belt, becomes a purple belt, becomes every time you hit him. So, or her, well, not her, but yeah, that's the deal. So I appreciate you saying that, and hopefully, I don't care about medals. I never wanted to be an Olympian, right? Even with like
Mm-hmm.
Kurt Angle or whatever. I want my purple belt for no other reason to compete at NAGA, the North American Grappling Association. Because if you're at a purple belt, guess what happens? You get a belt if you win the absolutes. I won a belt. I have it in my notebook from middle school that Adam Woods world champion. So Naka puts me one step closer to making the 14-year-old Adam proud, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's it, man. So do you have any, whether it be uh, as a fan or something that you've worked, do you have any favorite matches?
I have tons of favorite matches, both from ones I've worked to ones I've watched. I feel like a lot of people when they're asked that question, a lot of people like to throw something old like, "Oh, I liked 82 so and so." And I'm gonna be honest, I like matches from back in the day, especially like Shawn and Razor and that ladder
Mhm.
match in the first ever one at SummerSlam. I like that kind of stuff, but I do like a lot of the new stuff because I grew up more in the ruthless aggression
Yeah,
era. So my when I say like some of my favorite matches, they're not really those like 80s and early 90s classics. I like a variety of random different matches. One that people I don't even understand why they're so surprised by this answer, but one of my favorite all-time matches, and I'll explain it to you why, is Shawn Michaels versus Mr. McMahon at WrestleMania 22. Because I tell you, if you go and you watch that match, I swear that match is like watching a movie. We always say in wrestling, oh, we want to tell a story and this and this. That match and that whole storyline as to why it happened was very story driven. And the match itself, it was Shawn telling Mr. McMahon maybe he should just step down and basically not do this anymore. And then, because, he doesn't really have it. And Mr. McMahon's like, the evil boss, you kiss my ass, kiss his ass, bloody him up, have a bunch of cheerleaders beat the hell out of Shawn. They
yes, it's
literally
fun.
they crap all over Shawn Michaels the entire time leading up to WrestleMania. Even they had a Saturday night's main event match. Shawn goes out there, he's beating the hell out of Shane McMahon, and they do a screw job and they embarrass him again one more time. And you have Jim Ross on commentary,
Yep.
and he's like, these McMahons are gonna get what's coming to them this Sunday at WrestleMania. My God, you know what I mean? Like even the commentator JR is selling this match. And when it happens, you got Mr. McMahon, who's the boss. He's this asshole. And he's got, even to rub it into Shawn Michaels, he's got his muscle and farm poster out there. And he stands next to it. Match hasn't even started. And Mr. McMahon is jacked to the gills and
Yes.
stands up next to that
Yes.
poster like, yeah, look at me. Because he's bigger than Shawn in this match. And he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
look at me. And Shawn just goes out there, starts beating him up, freaking throws him over the commentator table. The commentary loses sound. He grabs the headset. He's choking Vince McMahon. JR finally gets back on commentator. Shawn takes that muscle and farm poster, smacks it over Vince McMahon's head, and then JR goes, yeah, now shove it up his ass. Like JR is getting you. He's getting you into this match. So now the audience is watching this. Yes, this is what we've been waiting for. Shawn is just beating the hell out of Vince McMahon. Here comes what was their name? The something squad, the
Spirit
cheerleader
Squad.
squad, the spirit
Spirit
squad.
Squad.
Here
Yeah.
comes the spirit squad. Now Vince McMahon is selling. He was just getting his ass whooped by Vince McMahon. And the Spirit Squad, they're putting in the heat. They throw Shawn up. They're
Yeah.
all dancing. They tell Kenny to get up to go do his jump. He goes up and they got that little thing that I don't know anything about cheerleading, but
Yeah.
that white thing that you like kind of
Yeah.
twirl
The
around or
horn something or other. Yeah. Yeah.
but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And he gets up, Shawn moves out of the way. Crowd pops. They pop. He grabs it. Boom, boom, boom. Takes out the Spirit Squad. Now the crowd is chanting. Yeah, because they were just booing because the Spirit Squad was putting the heat on Shawn. And now they come alive again because he just beat up the Spirit Squad. Now the crowd's like, yeah, yeah, he beat up the cheerleaders. Here comes Vince McMahon, cuts him off clothesline, takes his belt off. He's whooping Shawn, man. He's whooping his ass with the belt, man. And the crowd is, oh, they're eating it up. He puts the belt around Shawn's neck. I'm calling this match straight up because I wanted to explain like how crazy it is.
Yes.
And he's choking Shawn. Shawn starts to fire up, and the crowd in Chicago, They're eating all of this up, man. Sean
Mhm.
starts to fire back up. Now he's whooping Vince McMahon with the belt. Everything's going great. And here comes Shane McMahon. Whack. Hits him with the kendo stick. What's he doing now? Oh, he grabs him. And Vince McMahon, I remember my favorite part of the match. He starts undoing his belt. Or no, his pants. He starts taking his pants down very slow. And JR is still selling this match the entire time. JR goes, nobody wants to see your ass. And he turns around. Man, he's got the drawers down, man. He's got the drawers down. And now it's time to make Shawn Michaels join the Kiss My Ass Club.
Mhm.
Low blow to Shane. Shane's in the Kiss My Ass Club now. And Vince doesn't know. This is the story they're telling. The entertainment. Shawn's got Shane's head going up Vince McMahon's ass. And the crowd's cheering it up. And Vince is like, yeah, yeah. Turns around. Oh, shit. That's Shawn. That's Shane. That's not Shawn. Low blow. And then everything that they did. Now, like Shawn ties, because remember they had pulled out the
Yeah.
handcuffs. Another great part. He ties up Shane. He's twirling the key around, gives it a kiss, throws it out to the crowd. Shout out to the fan that has the key. I hope
Yeah.
they still have it to this day. And then he just wails on him. And again, it was so great, the story they told, because for months leading up to WrestleMania, all they were doing was embarrassing Shawn, bloodying him up, doing these super unfair matches, literally making his life a living hell. And it built up to this match at WrestleMania to where now Vince McMahon is living his own personal hell. Because once he handcuffed Shane to the rope, I mean, Vince took a brutal ladder shot to the head. He's cussed now. He's taken an unprotected chair shot to the head, trash can. And then the part where he pulls out the ladder, climbs up to it, and everybody thinks this is it. And Shawn says, nah, folds up the ladder. The crowd starts booing. And Shane's playing it up too. Shane's like, oh, yes, thank you, Shawn. You're listening. You didn't have to do this. Pulls out a ladder twice as big. And Shane McMahon's eyes
Mhm.
glow light up like he's seen a ghost. And boom, 1, 2, 3, elbow drop from the top with that ladder. And it was just great storytelling. And then at the end, they had this great visual with Vince giving Shawn the finger at the end of the day. That is Vince McMahon giving you the finger just when you thought you killed him. And I tell people, man, that is one of the best. That is, in my opinion, the best Mr. McMahon match and one of the best matches I've ever seen when it comes to telling a story, because they literally gave you almost a theatrical, live, story driven wrestling match. And it was great. So I always recommend people go watch that one. You can show that match to anybody and they will laugh, they will pop, they will go, holy crap. It's that amazing. Actually, when this podcast is over, I might go watch it right now. I hyped myself up to
Yes.
go watch that match.
You know what you did, right?
Hmm.
You angled yourself into probably a residual proposition with one Peacock network, because I think that's the best sell of the Peacock network that I ever heard out of my ears. And I'm deaf. I'm deaf, but I heard you loud and clear. So my goodness, like they owe you some residuals. I know there's some cost cutting measures and some it's not in the budgets and whatever, but you
Yeah.
go back to Chad Rico for all of 2 cents residual, like good brothers. And yeah, man, that needs to happen. But
Man,
speaking,
I'm telling you, man, if anybody tries, if anyone says, oh, like, I didn't think that match was that good, that's, man, we're throwing hands, man. I will defend that match every single day. That is one of my favorite all time matches right there.
I'm not refuting
Yeah.
you at all, and I'm not a
Yeah.
Sean fan. I'm a Brett guy. But
Hmm.
even though Brett gets a little bit whiny sometimes, I know, like I get it. My son's name is Owen, for goodness sakes, and Owen
Hmm.
Hart is all elite. Hashtag all elite. But with that all being said, speaking of things that are elite or things that are entertainment. There's been a lot of people, both professionally and personally, that have contributed to where you are now. So take as long as you need, good sir. And let's get some shout outs out of the way.
Man, the shout outs. Oh man, we're gonna go all night, but here we go. So some shout outs that I have to give. Obviously, some of the main ones. I give big shout out to B Boy and Norris Jarmoon, aka Bones. If they never came together and wanted to put Level Up together, I mean, yes, I probably would have ended up going to Santino Brothers, but I believe in the butterfly effect. The smallest decision that you make, whether it's you deciding, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee or no, I'm going to just stay in bed, I swear has repercussions like 15 years from now. I
Mhm.
know that sounds insane, but I'm
No,
telling you, I believe in the butterfly effect 100%. I cannot, I don't even want to think where I would be if those two never put Level Up together. So I want to give a huge shout out to those guys. Um, Another one, three guys that come to mind, and it means a lot because they're referees because they put a lot of trust into me. Nick Bonanno, Jeremy Marcus, and Odie, obviously. Um, Nick gave me a chance with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. That was the first time I ever worked live.
hey, oh, this happens right in the midst of this. Is thank yous and shout outs. But he's back. He's back.
I knew that
Here
was
we
going
go.
to happen again, but I was like, don't worry, I can get
No
it back
worries,
up
no
in two
worries.
seconds.
So you left off with Jeremy Marcus, who I love. You left off Nick Bonanno, and then there was the third one,
Odie,
Odie
good
Brown.
old
Oh
Odie Brown,
yes,
yeah.
friend of the show.
Yeah, yeah. I absolutely love those guys because those guys gave me the biggest opportunities I've seen in wrestling after I debuted. I remember Nick reached out to me to do the championship wrestling from Hollywood tapings during kind of like the middle of 2020 when everything was still shut down, basically. And I remember telling him because I wasn't sure if he had followed like my stuff or knew anything about me, but I remember I told him I said, "Hey, I have no TV experience. Like I've never even refereed a match before with an earpiece. I just want to make sure you know that." And he was like, "Yeah, all good." And I went there and I got to learn from him. I got to learn from Scott Johnson, Allison Lay, who had already been there. You know, I got to learn from everybody there, and it really helped. Kind of, it really helped my career because I got the great footage. I got to learn a lot because working TV is especially when you first start out, it's can be very difficult. And I found that working TV, I think, is the best way for you to get better as an official because there's 1,000 more things to do as a referee when you're working TV. So I want to give a huge shout out for Nick for putting that trust in me, bringing in someone who didn't have any TV experience and just simply taking a chance. And same thing to Jeremy. Jeremy reached out to me one random night about close to midnight. I believe I was already in bed. I was turning in the bed just to switch sides, and my phone was glowing. And I just remember going, who's messaging me like so late? And it was Jeremy reaching out. I don't know where he was at in the world, but him reaching out to do New Japan Strong. And I just remember going, okay, let's do this. Like that, it was almost like seeing Chuck Palumbo. I was like very starstruck. And same thing with Odie Brown. There, that going back to what we were talking about earlier, when I was telling you my second match ever was a death match in Los Angeles for Crimson Crown. They were shorthanded officials, and the one of the runner of Crimson Crown, Sage Sin, she reached out to Odie. Hey, can you put something in the Zebra Talk because we need referees, but referees in particular who are deathmatch comfortable. And he put it in there, and I said, I'm available. I can do it. I'm willing to try it out. And he got me in with Crimson Crown, and that was my intro into deathmatch wrestling. Rest his peace, rest his soul. The legendary Supreme. He he taught me a lot my very first day there about deathmatch officiating. He told me like a lot of do's and don'ts. Do this in this situation. He really helped shape me up to be the deathmatch referee that I have become. And if it wasn't for Odie putting me into Crimson Crown, I don't know if GCW would have ever happened because going back to that Orange County show, there's not a lot of referees out there that are deathmatch comfortable, and they didn't really have anyone down here. And Odie had reached out, said, "I've got a guy, he can do death matches, and I'll put in my trust that he'll do a good job." And went and worked GCW, and I've been affiliated with them ever since. So to those three guys, B Boy and Bones, those guys have really, and Lester, Supreme, those guys did a lot for my very early career and are still helping me out anytime I need questions. They're always there. I'm never afraid to ask. And I'm just very grateful for those guys. And I know Supreme would be the same way if he was still here, but he's in a better place now. So he's I'm hoping that he's proud. So anytime I do a death match for any promotion, I always think of Supreme. So
That's amazing. Yeah, and much like Joey Chaos, I was watching XPW with Larry Rivera and my friend now. It's crazy to say Chris Kloss and
I love Chris. I remember listening to Chris back in the Wrestling Society X days, man.
yeah, yeah,
And to be honest, that was Wrestling Society X. I will say this. If it was never for Wrestling Society X, I don't know. Well, I mean, obviously, I would have discovered independent wrestling, but they were my introduction to independent wrestling because all I was watching as a kid, WWE and TNA.
mm,
Sometimes I preferred TNA over
yeah,
WWE on some weeks, depending on what they were doing. Because I love Sting and Abyss. Those Sting and Abyss were my guys in TNA, and Mysterio and Cena were my guys in WWE. And I remember one day, because I used to watch MTV all the time. Like I would watch Celebrity Deathmatch, Viva La Bam,
yes,
Robin Big. Oh man, I miss those MTV days. But one day they had Wrestling Society X on. That was when I discovered Vampiro, uh, Jack Evans, Human Tornado, Matt Seidel. They had Six Pac on there. I said, "What's Six Pac doing on the show?" Like Wrestling Society X opened up the door for me into the independent world. I had no idea who a lot of these guys were, and I was like, "This is different. These guys are crazy good. These guys are insane." So shout out to because Chris Clausen, I remember hearing his voice, man.
yeah,
He was the commentator. He was the voice of WSX back in the days, man.
yeah. I unfortunately I never got to meet Keenan or Okerlund, but I
Mm-hmm.
outside of the pyramid in Long Beach, I got to meet Jim Ross, whatever, and not whatever. Jim Ross is like one of the benchmarks for me,
Yeah.
along with Joe Rogan and what have you. And I told Klaus the other night, Klaus is right up there with the Jim Rosses and the Joe Rogans, so in my estimation. And you look at that Pro Wrestling Society X roster. You had Tyler Black. You had Jimmy Jacobs. You had the Messiah who would become El Messias, who is familiar. Him and Vampire were mighty familiar with
Mm-hmm.
that place, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that place where they shot the Pro Wrestling Society X later becomes the Lucha Underground Temple. For those who don't know, in Boyle Heights, California, probably about 20 minutes away from me. So yeah, I mean, those are it, man. And I love that those are your influences. And man, you're gonna be working a lot of these guys and gals. So I can't wait. I cannot wait. So, for people who want to get in touch with you, to book you, to follow what you're doing, to procure your services, where's the best place they can do that, Chad Rico?
It's very simple. On Facebook, you could reach out to me on Facebook. There's one thing a lot of people always ask. They think Chad Rico is a gimmick referee name. No, that is my legitimate United States legal name in the books on my birth certificate. I don't have a gimmick name. I use my real name, and I guess ironically, I'm just kind of blessed because I get it. Chad Rico, like a lot of people say, "Oh, that's such a good name," and oh, like it sounds like one word, but like it's kind of a really solid referee name. That's why a lot of people think it's a gimmick name. And I've had people even still to this day, and I made it public, like how I am here. Hey, it's not a gimmick name. That's my real name. On occasion, I'll still have people go, well, so what's your real name? Or is Chad Rico your real name? No, yes, it's my real name. So to reach out to me for bookings, you can find me on Facebook. It's just Chad Rico. You can email me. The email's right there in my bio. Or you can just simply DM me on anywhere that you find any of my social media platforms. I respond to pretty much everything. Um, so yeah, that's the best way. Just don't feel shy. Feel free to reach out. I believe you'll have the links in the description of this video.
Yeah, absolutely, right down there. So anybody that is watching that on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, they have a direct access, which that's a pro and a con. My goodness, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have every way to reach you. Aside from your personal numbers, that's not cool. I'm not anonymous.
It's all good.
So man, I'm so proud of you. From where you've come, you've come such a long way in such a short time. May you continue to grow and see the virtue of all of your efforts. And also shout out to your family. Uh, well, again, you get your surname of Rico, which is amazing. And I'm going to bring it full circle because one Chuck Palumbo, during his WWE run, arguably the height of his WWE run, was a part of Billy and Chuck. It was him, he was Chuck, Billy, and they were managed by one Rico Constantino. So
Crazy, isn't it? I don't get it, man. The world makes no sense sometimes.
I'm
Great
just
wedding segment too. I love that
butterfly
segment.
effect as fuck. So I'm
Yeah.
just saying, dude, I'm proud of you. I love you. I can't wait to see what you're doing. Shout out to Zebra Talk. Shout out to everyone, And speaking of shout outs, thank you guys for joining us here at According to Woods. And if you haven't already done so, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the According to Woods podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. I mean, Chad, you're subscribed to the podcast, aren't you?
I believe so. If not, I'll do it right when this ends.
Hell yes. So do it like Chad is going to do it in like 30 seconds from now. But if you don't believe me, you don't believe Chad, and I don't know why you wouldn't, well, here's Pro Wrestler Zeta Zang.
Hey, this is Zeta Zang. Make sure you subscribe to According to Woods YouTube.